And now it's Deborah Cobalt Live and the Little Italy podcast.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for
Hi.
joining me today on Deborah Cobalt Live and the Little Italy podcast. Boy, do I have a treat for you today. We've got Linda Staci, former columnist with the New York Post, the New York Daily News. She's been on NY1. She's a novelist, and we're here to talk about her latest book, The Descendant. I love this book. Couldn't put it down. And what I love about it, Linda, is it's based very much on your life, on your family's life. It's incredible. Couldn't put it down. It really is amazing. To the point where last week you had somebody very well known interested in your book, and perhaps taking it a little further. Can I say that?
You can, but you can't say who it is.
We'll leave it right there, okay? Because
Okay.
it's so good. And if not, I'll do it. That's how much I love this book. It's beautiful, and I see it as a series.
Thank
I
you.
really do.
Thank you.
So anyway, thank you so much, Linda, for joining us. And gosh, where do I even start with someone like you? I suppose we can start with The Descendant. What is this book about? How is it even based on your family, on your mom, on her sisters? Talk to me about it.
Okay, so the book came to me. I always thought I'd like to write something about my mother and her sisters because whenever I was growing up and I'd say, oh, my mom rode her horse to school, and they'd say, but aren't you Italian? And I would say, yes, I am Italian. And yes, my mother rode her horse to school. It turns out that thousands upon thousands of Italians helped settle the West. And I wanted to change very much that stereotypical, and I call it unconscious bias against Italians. We all believe, or the accepted stereotype is that Italian immigrants came to America, came to New York and killed people and did terrible things. Well, in fact, my mother and her sisters grew up in Colorado. They were cowgirls. My uncles were drovers. It's like and it everybody that settled the West was an immigrant,
Yeah.
except for the people who really were here first.
Yeah. Well, talk to me about her stories, because you're right. Most people don't know that. I know my own family came, through Ellis Island and settled in, half of them in New York, half of them in New Jersey. That's more the common story you hear about. But Italians ended up everywhere.
Everywhere.
And yours in particular went to Colorado. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about your mom, her siblings, all of it.
Okay, so way back, like 1910 or 1905, there was tremendous earthquake in southern Italy. It was the largest earthquake ever recorded in Europe, which caused two tsunamis, one after the other, which completely wiped out the port of Messina. And so it killed something like 200,000 people, and the whole place was destroyed. So people started heading towards the mountains. But the mountains were in Sicily, they were having a drought. There was all kinds of corruption going on. So they were in terrible straits. And then when all these people, their relatives and whatnot came, everybody was starving. So Rockefeller Jr., John D. Rockefeller Jr., sent his, what they call padrones, into the southern Italy looking for strong young bucks. And they promised them land. And the president of America is so crazy. He just wants to give away land. He just wants it settled and this and that. And all you have to do is work a couple of years. And so he recruited young men that way. And the story was,
Wow.
yeah, that's what happened. They were desperate. And he said, oh, and your passage will be taken care of. And then in a couple of weeks, we'll call for your family and your family will come. And they said, well, what kind of work is it? And they said, oh, farming work, that's what they did anyway. So my grandfather and his brother walked the distance all across Sicily to get to the port, and where they were met by the padrone, as were many other Sicilian men. And they were loaded onto these awful ships that were unbearably terrible. And they came to Ellis Island, where they were picked up and taken by cattle car to Colorado or Pennsylvania to the mines. and
Right.
they were indentured workers. They were really slaves. They worked 18-hour days in the holes of the mines. They were a tremendous amount of, they fought everything from plagues to terrible winters to mine collapses to everything. And when it turned out they weren't paid even in American money, they were paid in company scrip. So that meant they could only shop in the company store. They were
Oh,
living
come
in these
on.
shacks. No, it's true. And then they had no way to tell their families. Oh, and by the way, when they got there, they found out that their passage came out of their pay, their scrip. And they didn't even supply them with pickaxes, or they had to pay for everything. So they were starving. And there was no way they could tell their wives and families not to join them because they were illiterate. They didn't read and write in any language. And even if they got someone to do the letters for them, the bosses would just toss them. So when their families came, they were also living in this horrific conditions. And then in 1914, the United Mine Workers came to Colorado and they talked the people into striking. And Rockefeller said, everyone who strikes is fired. So the United Mine Workers built a tent city in Ludlow, Colorado, where something like 1,200 families of strikers were living. And this is the truth. Rockefeller hired the National Guard as his own private militia. And at night, they would come with a thing they called the Death Squad Special. And it was an armored car with a machine gun on the top. And they just start spraying these people. So the miners, who are all immigrants, built many, many, many Italians built trenches under their tents for their families to hide in when the bullets started flying. So Rockefeller was so disgusted that the strike was going on and on. He said, just do what you have to do. So the National Guard and this detective agency, also a bunch of thugs, went in and poured oil on top of the tents and set them on fire, trapping these women and families and children underneath, where they roasted to death. And it was considered the worst labor incident in American history. And it's called the Ludlow Massacre, and no one's heard about it. So a female reporter, which was rare at the time, went in and she found the National Guard cutting heads off of the dead people so they couldn't be identified, the children, the hands and heads. And then the strikers saw what they were doing, and there was a big riot. She counted something like 55 or 65 dead women and children, and the government rounded it off to 22. And so after that, there was all these guys and their families were living wild in the mountains of Colorado. They didn't speak the language, they didn't read and write, they had no way to make a living. It was awful, and they were living during blizzards and wild beasts. And so in 1916, Colorado declared prohibition 4 years before the rest of the country. And these Italian families said, we know how to make wine. We know how to make sugar beet booze. And that's how bootlegging started in the United States, started in Colorado. And that's how the Mafia actually started in the United States as well, because the government hired KKK members to be liquor enforcement agents, and they had basically a license to kill all the Italian immigrants because they'd go where they were and they'd say, well, they have a still, and they'd kill them. So the Mafia started forming because they said, well, we have to unite so that we can fight this. And in the 15th century in Sicily, there was something called mafioso, which meant the bold, and they had organized both the nobles and the peasants to fight the French invaders. So it was sort of like, we will be like the mafioso, and that's how it started in the United States, not in New Orleans and not in New York. And all those movies that you see, those guys, those Al Capone guys were getting their liquor from Colorado until
Wow.
yeah, so it's all history that is not been told.
It is not until,
No.
you're telling it. So talk to me about your family's involvement. Talk to me about your mother and all the strong women that you highlight in this book, The Descendant.
Yeah, okay. My mom had a pet wolf when she was a little girl. And I suspect that it was probably maybe a half dog, half wolf. I don't know. She always said it was her wolf. And the name was Blue. And it protected her from her father, who had become very brutal from everything that had happened to him. He just turned into a monster. And they had a bootlegging enterprise, and they joined with other families. But my mother was the only one who had, at the time, the nerve to go against her father, even as a little girl, because she had Blue, the wolf, on her side. So the wolf protected her, and my mother had. There were actually my grandmother had 16 births, although
Oh,
11 lived. Um, so eventually they stopped living in this hideous shack and they made enough bootlegging to buy land and eventually became ranchers. And and they were still bootlegging, but my aunts, I didn't know as a little girl growing up that it was weird, but I had one aunt who was an out and out lesbian who had a husband and a wife. Other of my aunts married African American guys. One of them married a Native American, I don't know what tribe it was. And they did everything that you never heard Italian girls doing. They certainly weren't sitting around in the kitchen. They were rustling cattle. I mean, not rustling. They were herding cattle and they were riding in the rodeo and they were doing all these outlandish things. And so on Sundays when the family would gather, I just didn't think there was anything strange about my aunts showing up with these various relationships they had.
I love this. What a cool thing. And I thought my family was colorful. This is incredible. So, okay.
So my mother fought her father, and my grandmother was very strong. And apparently, my grandmother took over the bootlegging business because my grandfather was out whoring around and whatever he was doing. And at some point, and I mean, there's a lot, as you know, in the book
Yeah.
between then and what I'm telling now. At some point, Al Capone showed up at the ranch, and my mother said there were these black cars that came in, and it was like, "Mommy, what is that? What do you know?" And she said my grandmother put out a big spread, and everybody was, and that we don't exactly know what happened. There are several different stories, but my mother said within 3 months or so, they left Colorado and came to New York and they were not
Wow.
allowed to be there anymore. I think it had to do with
Wow.
my grandfather, who was on the FBI or whatever it was called at that time as an assassin, and he had killed rival family members and not members, other families. He had killed rival bootleggers, and he was a wanted criminal. And my feeling is that Al Capone was very big by that time, and he didn't want this to go on because it was bad for business. They were disturbing
Wow.
the whole bootlegging business. So, for whatever reason, and there are many, that's one story, they came to New York. Not the whole family. My one couple of aunts were allowed to stay and um, run the ranch and so forth. But
And
that's
how did they make a living in New York?
Well, not very well. My grandfather came first, and my grandmother had a lot of money, and she gave him money to buy a house. And they were supposed to be relocate in Red Hook, and they would do money laundering or whatever, I don't know. And they had a store, like a general store. And by the time my grandmother got there, he had run through all the money gambling and whoring and doing all this. So and my grandmother was like insane because they moved into a tenement with like 8 people in or one
Oh
room,
God.
a tenement. So she's like, we're right back where we started. And so she hooked up with some of the locals and managed to have some money laundering going on. And she also ran the store, and she would pack up food every night that wasn't sold that day and deliver it to all the families very discreetly that were starving. And my aunts and my mother helped her do that every day. And they just never got over not being in Colorado, though. They loved having all the freedom. And when they
I
came to
bet.
New York, it was like, why are these horses all pulling, this terrible stuff, and why are they hitting them, and where are the dogs and where are the wolves, and so it was never quite the same for her.
Gosh, and to be a little kid and hearing about all this, I could only imagine the impression that it had on you. No wonder why you became a journalist, right? I always like to say I became a journalist because one of my questions as a little girl was why? Nothing ever really made
Yeah,
sense,
yeah. I
right?
was
So it's
always
like,
asking questions, always, always, always. And I
right?
also felt that it was important to write this book because, as I started saying before, the unconscious bigotry against Italians, it makes me crazy. I mean, people, how many people have come up to me and go, "Hey, Goomba." I was like, what? Would you
I
say that
know.
to somebody else of a different ethnicity? And then one of my editors in the newsroom, they were having some kind of meeting. I don't know, some mobster got killed or something. I don't know what it was. And he called me and he goes, "Here, Stacy is Italian. She's connected." I said, "I'm connected to the internet. What kind of bullshit is this? Is this?" And another time, my husband had this crazy doctor. He was a good doctor, but I don't. He was crazy. And every time I'd go in there, he'd say, "Hey, you're Italian. You must know a good hitman to kill my wife." And I'd say, "No, I don't." So I just wanted to dispel this common ridiculousness. And you saw in the book how much, even the New York Times saying that Southern Italians were the worst and lowliest humans on the planet, and they shouldn't
Yep.
be allowed to go to school with the children of good, hardworking white mechanics. And, it's like, and we seem to be the only ethnicity that allows that stereotype to continue.
Certainly, and certainly back in its time. And even though it's dissipated somewhat, it's still out there. It really
Yeah.
is. Like to this day, I'll be somewhere and someone will say, "Oh, well, you're Italian, you're crazy." It's like, excuse me?
Yeah, I know.
Are we passionate people? Yep.
Yeah.
Do we really believe in what we're saying and what we're doing? Yep.
Yep.
But that also makes us terrific contributors to society.
Yeah,
So
really.
I'm absolutely with you. Let me ask you a little bit about the correlation, right, between your book, um, the Carlinos, is that how you say it, versus the
Yes.
Corleones. The Corleones are the family, of course, in The Godfather. Talk to me about this because it's everywhere. When I do research about you in this book, it's coming up. So talk to me.
So, in the writing of the book, I actually connected with a long lost relative, Sam Carlino, who is like the barbecue king of San Jose, and I love him to death. And he gave me a party and at his barbecue place, a book party. But we talked, and my aunt was married to Charlie Carlino.
Mm,
So Charlie Carlino was the favored son of Vito Carlino, who was the Don, and he had
right.
3 sons and 1 daughter. Charlie, the favored son, was killed by the rival family as he was crossing the bridge over the river.
Oof,
Just like, so Vito Carlino, Vito Corleone, three
right.
sons, 1 daughter. Charlie, the favored son, is killed by the rival gang crossing a bridge. I thought, oh my God, is this possible that
Right.
Godfather was based on the Carlinos? I mean, because back
Wow.
then when it was written, he all he Mario Puzo would have to do is go to the New York Public Library. Everything was on microfiche at that time. I mean, that's how I discovered. I read a bazillion stories about the shootout and everything. It was all there
Wow.
from way back in the day. It's all there. So I was wondering, I mean, it just seemed too coincidental to be a coincidence. I mean,
How,
even the father's name, Vito, Carlino,
yeah.
Don.
How did you do all of this research for this book? Obviously, based on a lot of your own family history, but where did you do it? How did you do it? Because that's what impressed me. Just, I mean, it's historical fiction, but it's based deeply in history.
Right, right. I didn't do what a lot of historical writers do and just make up
Right, you
all the
didn't.
ancillary characters and they take one incident and then they make it into a book. These were, it started out based on stories that my family told. And it was always very, well, my aunts were, oh, and my mother were very frank. Like my aunt, who was the one who had a husband and a wife. I, and her husband in the book is One Eye Walnut Jack. Yes, she did knock his eye out with a walnut on their wedding night because she didn't want him to touch her. But I once said to her, I said, Aunt Mary, how long have you been married? And she said, all my GD life, but she didn't say GD. All my DD life, that's how long. And I said, oh, Aunt Mary, I'm only 8 years old. She said, well, you should learn.
Isn't that the
They were
way?
very frank. But when it came to things like the Ludlow massacre, it was like people who've been in war and they don't tell the horrors of it often. They just tell the outline of it or the funny stories about it.
Right.
So I thought, well, let me dig into that. And then it was like, holy good God.
Yeah.
So, I'm a journalist, so I don't ever take anything at face value. I have always said to everybody who's ever worked for me, don't come to me with a tip. A tip is like the tip of an iceberg, and all the junk is below it. Dig, dig. Don't come to me with this.
Yeah.
So that's what I did. I dug and dug and dug. Um, my one aunt was still alive, and she really opened my eyes to a lot of stuff that I didn't know
Wow.
um, about my various aunts and their sex lives and all this stuff, and how my uncles were drovers, and I didn't really know any of that, and so a lot of it was just serious journalistic research, and a lot of it, I went to Sicily. I found my family. I found what was left and where they came from and
Wow.
all that stuff. And I'm very happy that that's just the way I do things. I want to go
Yeah.
places. I want to know what it smells like. I want to know what it's like if you walk. Are the streets broken? Are they cobblestones? Are they dirt roads? Whatever. I just need to know that. And
Yeah.
yeah, so I boots on the ground and a lot of research. But I
And it,
also it just I think I really think that the book wasn't especially written by me. I think it was just fed to me by my ancestors because who the hell? I didn't know all that. I mean, I got their voices in my head and I just wrote.
yeah. And it was important for you to also tell the story of these women who were very strong, correct?
Right, right. Because we always believe that especially Italian women back in the day were, they weren't. I mean, those guys didn't build what they had by themselves. These
Yeah.
women were the backbone of the family. And when their husbands very often went to drink and were no good, they took over and they raised those families and they had a very strong hand. And my grandmother had a very, very strong hand. And she
Hmm.
raised very strong daughters who didn't take no crap from nobody. No, and
No.
my mother always said to my brother and I, because when we'd come home and say, "Oh, the kids said we're, Italian and we're dark," and my mother would say, "Nobody's better than you. Nobody." And people have said to me, "Well, then didn't she say, and you're better than nobody?" I said, "No, no, she just left it at that. Nobody's better than you." And we actually engraved that on her gravestone, on her, yeah, tombstone. Yeah,
Oh, that's
because
great. Oh,
nobody's
that's
better than
beautiful.
you.
Oh, wow. Let's talk a little bit about you as a journalist in New York, an
Okay.
award-winning journalist, okay? The New York Post, the New York Daily News, New York One cable channel. I mean, you're
Newsday.
synonymous. Newsday. I mean, come on, the list goes on.
Yeah.
You are synonymous with sort of, journalist royalty in New York. I
Oh,
remember
well,
even
I don't
when
think
I
they'd
was,
say it.
but I would, because I'm from
Thank
back
you.
there, and I know all the names. My husband was very excited. He goes, "Oh, I know her work implicitly," and your
Wow,
your
wow. So
husband as
nice.
well. Your husband as well. You guys were a real power couple in New York. I know he only died recently, so I'm sorry
Yes.
about that.
Yeah.
Talk to me about your life as a journalist in New York. A very rich life, and by that I mean in terms of your experiences.
So my first job was at New York Newsday. And
Right,
I had been a beauty editor before that, and I hated it. But, I was a single mom, so whatever
right.
job I could get, pay the tuition and pay the bills. Um, and all of a sudden, I was hired at this job because somebody had read one of my books, and they hired me. And all of a sudden, I was like, I have to produce a daily column
Yeah.
on all these of stuff in New York and get the dirt. And I was just like, yikes. So I get there, and I'm like, and the first day I was on the job, and this is back in like 1989, I think I started. I get a call, and I'm like, I don't know what to write. I don't know what to do. I get a call. I had two people working for me, and they were like, they hated me because they wanted the job, and I shouldn't have gotten it, and all that stuff. So I get a call, and a guy says to me, I'm a gay man, and I just got this vicious note from Andy Rooney, who was the guy on 60 Minutes, calling me
Hmm.
all kinds of names.
Oh,
So I said, "Oh." So he I guess at that time he must have faxed it over or something. And I called, and I'm like, how am I going to call Andy Rooney and ask him if this is really his letter? So I called and I said, I got his voicemail or something, and I said, my name is Linda Stacy. I'm working at Newsday, and somebody's accused you of writing this letter, and I just need to have you deny it or whatever. And he called me back and he said, yep, I did it. That was my first story.
wow.
Yeah,
Wow.
I know. It was my
And the
first story.
the rest, I guess, just followed, right? With your column, with your stories, with all of it. Wow. It just takes one moment, doesn't
I
it?
know, I know. And I just happened, I mean, I couldn't believe it. It was literally my first day on the job. And it's like I'm nobody from nowhere, and I'm calling Andy Rooney, who was like the guy on 60 Minutes. He was it. And it was like, I'm scared to death, but I did
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Well, there goes your beauty editor
it.
job, right? That went out the window. And then you became,
Right.
I guess, a really serious journalist and columnist from then on.
Yeah. And plus people got to trust me, to know that I was going to be fair and tell the truth. And I brought in a lot of crazy front page stories. Another time, it was I think it was that same first year, um, I got a call from this guy from jail, and it was Jerry, I forgot his last name. He was the head of the IRA and um, the Irish Republican Army, and he
Hmm.
was in jail in New York City in the Tombs. Oh no, in the New York Correction Center or something. And he said, "Is this Linda Stacy?" I said, "Yes." He said, "This is Jerry, whatever his name." He said, "I have a message from Mr. Gotti." I
Oh,
said, "Oh, okay." He said he would like to give you something, but you can only have it for 2 hours. I said, well, "What is it?" He said, I he's sending someone over to your building, and they will call you, and you'll meet them in the lobby, and you will take it and keep it for 2 hours. So I said, great. So I
oh.
went down to the lobby. I got it. It was the sealed court records from his trial that nobody had ever seen. And I had 2 hours to read it. So I had everybody reading pages and pages and pages. And that was that same year. So And then I suddenly started getting, I was going to write my first book, my first novel, and I was blackballed by every literary agent. No, no, can't talk to you. No, no, no. And then one of my friends who was with that one literary agency found out, and she said that Giuliani he was mayor at the time, um, has told everyone that you're John Gotti's mistress and that you're too dangerous to be touched. I never even met the man. Yeah.
Wow.
And
Oh my
I was
goodness.
also the first one to find out that Michael Jackson was a pedophile.
Oh
Another
my goodness.
another crazy story. There was this PR guy, Bernie Bennett, and he was a great guy. And one day he comes in and he said, "Let's go out. Well, let's go out for coffee or something." I said, "Okay." So he said, "I have to tell you something." I said, "What?" He said, "Michael Jackson is sexually abusing my nephew." I said, "What?" His nephew is this kid, Jordy. I forgot what his last name was. Um, and I said, "Well, what do you mean?" And he said, "Well, he Michael Jackson, Jordy's stepfather, ran Rent-A-Wreck in California. And one day Michael Jackson came in to rent a car wreck so that nobody would recognize him. And he called home and he said, "Oh, get the kids over here. Michael Jackson's here." And they came, and Michael got one look at Jordy, and that was that. And somehow the mother of the kids thought that Michael Jackson was in love with her. And that's why he was coming around all the time. And that's why he took them to Europe. And that's why. And he said, and then Jordy finally broke down, told his father, his real father, who was like dentist to the stars. And he also co-wrote Robin Hood Men in Tights. And suddenly he wanted it known. So I did the story that Michael was wandering around with his child dressed like him. And I didn't actually say what it was, but it was very well implied. And immediately the dentist's office got ransacked. There were people outside his office with guns. And then after the trial, he and Jordy went into hiding somewhere and they had plastic surgery and all kinds. And then the father finally killed himself.
I have to tell you, those are stories that I actually even stay away from. And I'll tell you why. Because I don't know, as a journalist myself, I mean, I've been in some precarious situations and I never really wanted to get involved where it was, he said this is happening. And then he said this is happening because, right, you just, including mobster stories. I remember when I did live back east, I was covering some of them down in Philadelphia,
Mhm.
Scarface. And it was just a situation where I remember I didn't want to be involved. And if that came on my doorstep with Michael Jackson, I don't think I would have wanted to be involved because it's complicated. And in a weird way, as a journalist, sometimes it compromises you and you could be put in danger. I mean, did you ever
Well,
feel throughout your career that,
I didn't really feel that way till, well, one time I found somebody trying to wire my apartment. They were standing outside my door when I got home. Um,
oh God,
but I felt more in danger from the nuts, who'd write and say, "I know your daughter's wearing red shorts today." It's like,
oh,
those are the people that frighten me. Because even the most notorious people could never say I didn't tell the truth. I mean, I didn't say Michael Jackson was abusing the boy. I said he's traveling all around with this young person and his family is very concerned and this and that.
right.
And then a lot of people took up the mantle after that.
No,
And
I understand. But let
yeah,
me ask
but I
you
mean,
more about,
I would always make sure I had three sources on every story
oh, absolutely. You have
and
to
the other
with what
side
you,
and the other side.
and the other
Now it's
side.
like the Wild West because everybody who has a keyboard thinks they're a reporter. And, with Donald Trump going around saying, I have stories about him too, going around saying that it's fake media, fake news. He's the one who invented it. He would call up every day with some fake, stupid story. And we'd
I
all
mean,
say, Donald, we know it's you, and just hang up.
what's it like working in New York media all these years? You walk into a room and people are probably saying something like, "Shh, don't say anything. It's Linda Stacy." Right? Or are they saying like, thank you for all the work you've done. You've had quite a distinguished career
Oh,
in New
thank
York
you.
City, very reputable, respected. When you look back at your career, you must feel pretty good about that.
Yeah, I do. And I'm very, very happy that I quit when I did
Yeah,
because I quit. I quit really being doing columns as a journalist at the start of COVID because the Daily News closed down their newsroom,
right,
never to open it again.
right.
And I had no desire to be working at home. And I just said, well, if I'm going to work at home, I may as well just work for myself. I didn't want to
Yeah,
do it anymore. And the newsroom had changed. The Daily News had been, they're all being bought up by these rich guys and these conglomerates. And it's nonsense if you think they don't have influence. They
yeah.
have
No,
huge influence.
no,
And
it was a different time. Yeah,
it
different
just,
time.
yeah. So I'm very, very, very happy that I was able to be there in the heyday of the tabloid wars and all that. It was so much fun. And, you go out at night and you go to Elaine's or somewhere like that, and at the bar would be, politicos and mobsters and writers, and it was really fun. And then all of a sudden it was like, oh, he has mob affiliations. Why? Because I'm in the same restaurant as somebody, and it all got scrambled up. And now, I mean, so much of it is AI, and I don't think that these kids are ever going to be able to do a stakeout, know what that's like. A friend of mine, who's a very respected journalist, and I won't say her name because what I'm going to say. She's still a journalist. She's on air camera. I mean, she's on camera, and she was very excited because she was offered a gig teaching journalism.
Yeah.
So she's very excited, and she's just finishing up her first year. She said, "I'm never doing it again." I said,
Oh,
"Why?" She said, "They don't want to be journalists, and it's a really good school." She said, "What they want to be, what they do is they do AI." She said, "I spend all my whole time figuring out which is AI and which isn't." And she said 90% of them are using AI. They are not doing their own stories.
yeah. There
And she,
and
and
what
she said
I
to them, you want to learn to be a journalist. You want to learn to write like a journalist. How is it that you think that AI is, then why would you do it at all? Why would you
no,
do it at all?
I
So,
could see if you want to use it to sort of fact check with a little bit of information you have. But even then, you have to fact check your AI. Look, it's still very new, and people have to learn how to use it and apply it properly,
right.
as
But
opposed to using it as the gospel, honestly. But before I let you go, I do want to ask you this. So you've been a journalist and now a novelist. Is it really difficult to go from one to the other?
it took me a long time to figure it out
Really?
because I'll tell you a quick funny story. Nelson DeMille was my mentor. He's the one who told me you tell great stories. You should be a novelist. I was like, oh. So I started my first book and I got sold, and I was called The Sixth Station, and I called Nelson in a panic and I said, oh my God, it's already gone to print. I think I made a huge mistake. He said,
Oh,
what'd you do? I said, I think I said that this is absolutely the truth. I said, I think that I said this cheese was manufactured in a certain place and it's not. It's in a different place. And he goes, oh, for God's sakes, it's fiction. You can make up whatever you want. And he slammed down the phone on me. But yeah, it's very difficult because also it's sort of like teaching a singer to dance or to act. It's
hmm.
both in the same field, but it's totally different. Because with journalism, an editor will say, I could go to an editor and say, oh, the Pope just called me up and he killed 10 people. And the editor would say, oh, for God's sakes, hurry up. You got 15 minutes.
Right.
And with a book, that would take, if the Pope told you he killed 10 people, it would take 10 books to write it. Everything is drawn out and half the stuff is made up. And It's completely different. So I teach a class to at the Newswomen's Club of New York. I volunteer to teach other female journalists how to write novels because we're all stuck in that space where if you want to write a novel, it can be based on truth, but you can't fill a whole novel with based on. You have to make some stuff up. You don't know what people are doing in their bedroom. You don't know what they're saying to each other. So yeah, it's a totally different discipline, totally different. And also, when you're in a newsroom, not only is everything really quick, you're with a million people who are screaming and yelling and throwing things and getting crazy. And when you're a novelist, you're sitting in your house or whatever by yourself, you know?
Yeah, you're left with your thoughts. Although I will say I've been in many newsrooms lately out here, the TV stations. There's nobody left inside a
Yeah,
newsroom. Like
yeah, yeah.
literally, it's empty. It's a
Horrible.
shocking experience to walk into a newsroom and find nobody there. I mean, even the cameras are automated. It's amazing. Any parting words you'd like to say about, your life in New York, being an Italian woman, and certainly about your book, The Descendant, that we're here to talk
Well,
about?
I just hope that I'm just begging people, if you read the book, please leave a review. Even if you hate it, just leave a
Ah,
review. That's really important. And I think that all Italian people should at least know the story of the other story of our own ancestors' immigration experience. Do you know 90% of the young men in my grandparents' village of Lucca di Secula in Sicily, 90% ended up in Pueblo, Colorado. They were
wow.
recruited. 90%. So the town must have just been women and old people. 90% left, recruited
Wow.
by the Padrones.
Yeah. What an
So
incredible
my
story.
parting words is I'm very, very grateful that I have the career that I have. And, you know, I tell my grandkids to just think about as you grow up what you really love to do. And, if you can have a job doing what you love to do as opposed to just making money, and you wake up every day and you're excited to go to work, that's the best of all possible worlds, to me, anyway.
You've managed to do it, and quite a
You do
colorful life
too.
you've
You do
led. Yeah.
too.
No, absolutely. I mean, honestly, I didn't really want to continue being involved in the daily grind of news where, it's the latest tragedy. That's why I decided to do podcasting and do what's interesting to me. And that would
Right.
make you. So, Linda, Staci, thank you so much for
Oh,
joining
thank you
us.
so much. You're just an angel, and I can't wait till you come to New York. And I'm going to take you to the Columbus Club, and we're going to eat until we fall off our chairs.
I look forward to that so much. So, thank you so much,
Thank
Linda
you.
Staci.
Thank you.
Please pick up The Descendant. It's terrific. And everybody, you could find my interview with
There it is.
Linda Staci on all video and audio platforms of Deborah Cobelt Live and also the Little Italy podcast. I welcome you to also invite your friends to listen to our interview with Linda and, tell us what you think and make sure
Thank
to
you.
pick up the book and leave that review. So
Thank
anyway,
you so, so much, Deborah. You're just wonderful. Thank you.
thank you, Linda. And again, my name, Deborah Zara Cobelt, Linda Staci and The Descendant. We look forward to seeing you next time. Bye-bye.